The case of Natasha Neuer. Natasha Neuer, 37 years old, suddenly disappeared without any notice. She did not visit her mother, respond to phone calls, or return home. As the day progressed, it became apparent that none of her friends or colleagues had seen her either. Her concerned relatives reported her missing at 5 p.m., prompting a police investigation. Natasha worked as a public relations specialist for the Correctional Service of Canada. Detectives began by interviewing her co-workers. Upon their arrival, they found her car still parked nearby. A nervous-looking man, Michel Trottier, was standing by the vehicle. He claimed to be in a relationship with Natasha and was trying to figure out where she might have gone. The back door of Natasha's car had scratches, but it was unclear if they were related to her disappearance. With no reason to suspect Michel Trottier of involvement, detectives continued their investigation. Coworkers reported that Natasha had been at work on October 1, 2009, the day before she vanished. She appeared in a good mood, friendly and untroubled, with no signs of anything unusual. On October 2nd, Natasha had requested a day off to address matters related to her recently deceased father's tombstone. To make up for the time, she had worked longer hours on October 1st and left the office around 8 p.m. According to her friends, Natasha was a kind and open person with no known conflicts or enemies. The police launched a large-scale search for Natasha, involving aviation and canine units. Initially, they focused on the area around the parking lot, but found no clues to aid the investigation. Natasha's friends and relatives distributed flyers with her photo, hoping someone might have information regarding her disappearance. The first few hours after a person goes missing are crucial for finding witnesses or evidence. However, in Natasha's case, valuable time was lost because the police were not notified until the evening of October 2nd, 21 hours after she had left work. The search for Natasha took place from October 3rd to 5th, but unfortunately, no leads were discovered. Her family offered a $10,000 reward for any information that could help locate her. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Now let's move on with the video. Natasha's boyfriend, Michel Trottier, suspected she had been kidnapped and made a televised plea for her safe return. Meanwhile, police investigated their personal lives. They had been together for 4 years, but their relationship had been tumultuous with multiple breakups and reconciliations. The police explored all possible scenarios surrounding Natasha's disappearance. Investigators reviewed CCTV footage from her workplace, both inside and outside the building. The footage showed Natasha arriving at 9:04 a.m. and leaving at 8:07 p.m. She had parked her car in a poorly lit area of the parking lot, and the cameras captured her walking towards it. However, she eventually disappeared from view due to the darkness. After a few minutes, the car's headlights turned on, and it began moving, but instead of heading toward the exit, it drove to the opposite side of the parking lot, which was also poorly lit. The car stopped, and the headlights went out. The vehicle remained in this position for about 20 minutes before moving toward the exit. It was later determined that this car was not Natasha's, as she owned a Mazda. Further investigation revealed that the car in the CCTV footage was a Ford Windstar minivan, which had entered the parking lot at 6:35 p.m. and parked next to Natasha's vehicle. Based on this evidence, police concluded that Natasha Neuer's disappearance was likely a kidnapping. On the 5th day of the search, October 6, 2009, the focus shifted from locating a missing person to investigating a homicide. Natasha's body was discovered in a vacant lot in the Pointe-aux Trembles area, approximately 20 miles from her workplace. The body was found next to a dirt road that led to the riverbank. The news of Natasha's death devastated her relatives and friends, who were further shaken by the medical examiner's report. According to the report, Natasha had been strangled. In addition to strangulation, she had suffered 9 facial injuries, including a broken nose, and had marks on her wrists and ankles indicating she had been bound. Seminal fluid was also recovered from her body, providing a source for DNA analysis. While awaiting the DNA results, detectives worked to identify the owner of the minivan captured on camera the day Natasha vanished. In 2009, 2 motels were located near Natasha's workplace. On October 16th, 10 days after her body was discovered, police visited both motels to review guest registration records. At the Lido Motel, they found a guest who had registered a Ford Windstar. 48-year-old Claude LaRouche, a registered sex offender with 2 prior convictions. In 1993, Claude had been sentenced to 1 year in prison and 2 years of probation for coercing a 19-year-old acquaintance into sex. In 2005, he received a 40-month prison sentence for attempting to kidnap a 7-year-old girl who had managed to escape to a neighbor's house. Claude's relatively light sentence for the attempted child kidnapping raised questions about the justice system's handling of the case. After his November 2008 release, he began working as a carpenter. He married a woman with 2 sons, and the family lived about 10 minutes from the location where Natasha disappeared. Detectives discovered that Claude had checked into a motel on the night Natasha went missing. Forensic experts examined the room and found dark red stains on the carpet, which were sent for analysis. On the same day, detectives visited Claude at his home. Since he had a prior prison record, his DNA was already on file, but authorities needed time to compare it to the DNA recovered from Natasha's body. Claude initially claimed he did not know Natasha, but admitted that he often stayed at the Lido Motel because it was inexpensive. He stated that he was dissatisfied with his marital life and frequently rented motel rooms to meet women who offered paid sexual services. When asked about his whereabouts on October 1st, the day Natasha disappeared, Claude claimed he could not remember, citing excessive substance use, although parts of his memory later returned. On November 5, 2009, approximately 1 month after Natasha's body was discovered, detectives returned to Claude LaRouche's house. DNA analysis confirmed that the seminal fluid found in Natasha Neuer's body matched Claude LaRouche's. Additionally, Natasha's DNA was found in the motel room rented by Claude and inside his car. Montreal police stated there was no connection between the crime and Connoir's employment at the Correctional Service of Canada, and the victim was not acquainted with the suspect. Following Claude's arrest, Montreal Police Inspector Daniel Rousseau remarked that citizens could now feel safer in public spaces. The news of the arrest astonished Claude's neighbors, who described him as a friendly and polite individual. On the following day, November 6, 2009, Claude LaRouche became a suspect in Natasha Neuer's case. At first, he denied any involvement, but when confronted with substantial evidence, he admitted to taking Natasha's life. However, he claimed that her death was accidental rather than intentional. During his 2011 trial, 2 differing versions of events surfaced, one from Claude and his defense team, and the other from the prosecution. According to Claude's testimony, he had been waiting in a parking lot for a drug dealer on the evening in question. While sitting in his car, Natasha appeared beside him. He then attacked her, forced her into his vehicle, and closed the door. Afterwards, Claude spoke with Natasha, and she allegedly agreed to go with him to a motel. Claude LaRouche experienced memory lapses, leaving him unable to recall why he had remained in the parking lot for 20 minutes or what actions he had taken during that period. However, he conveniently remembered certain moments that favored his narrative. According to LaRouche, Natasha offered to satisfy his demands in exchange for her freedom while they were in the motel room. He agreed, but after she complied, they got into an argument. Claude lost control, assaulted Natasha, and ultimately strangled her. He then cleaned the room, moved her body to his car, drove home, and went to bed. The next morning, after the effects of the substances he had consumed wore off, he realized the seriousness of his actions. Claude decided to dispose of Natasha's body. While driving to the location where the body was later discovered, he cut her documents and bank cards into pieces and threw them out of the car window. However, it is important to note that this account comes directly from LaRouche, and the more he recounted, the more inconsistencies and questions arose about his claims. According to Claude's testimony, the day after disposing of Natasha's body, he returned to the site and covered her with a blanket, fearing she would become cold. He revisited the body the following day to retrieve the blanket, concerned it would impede her discovery. LaRouche's statements indicate that his actions were influenced by a clouded state of consciousness, leading to irrational decisions. He claimed he had no intention of taking Natasha's life, a point he sought to convey during the trial. The prosecution's case relied on physical evidence and witness testimony. The witness reported that while walking his dog near the parking lot on the day Natasha disappeared, he observed Claude attempting to attack a jogger around 7 p.m., but Claude retreated when he noticed the witness and his dog. Natasha Neuer was attacked approximately an hour later. The prosecutor argued that Claude had bound and abducted Natasha, taking her to a motel where she ultimately lost her life. In June 2011, Claude LaRouche was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. During the trial, it was revealed that only 2 weeks after Natasha's murder, Claude attempted to strangle another woman, Dominique Martel. She managed to fend him off by biting his finger. Consequently, Claude was classified as a dangerous offender under Canadian law, making his prison sentence indefinite and significantly reducing the likelihood of early parole. Natasha had a peaceful and fulfilling life, with ambitions and goals, all of which were brutally taken away by a man with a record of serious crimes. Despite his criminal history, Claude had been allowed to move freely, living within the community without adequate supervision. The fact that he had previously attempted to kidnap a 7-year-old girl raises questions about how he could reintegrate into society without proper monitoring. Natasha's loved ones continue to struggle with these unresolved questions, haunted by the thought that if the system had functioned correctly and Claude had been held accountable, Natasha might still be alive today. Moving on to the next case. The case of Patrick de la Cerda. In February 2018, the quiet town of Deltona, located in eastern Florida near the Atlantic coast, faced a shocking incident: the brutal murder of a young man named Patrick Dira. The 25-year-old man was found dead in his home. The nature of his injuries suggested a deeply personal motive behind the attack. The Patrick Dira case is emblematic of a meticulously planned crime that nearly went unsolved. Although the suspect was identified almost immediately, no direct evidence was available to confirm his guilt. Patrick Dira was born in June 1992 in Miami, Florida, a picturesque metropolitan area. Patrick grew up under the care of his father, Max Dira, originally from Spain, and his mother, Patricia Ronza, born in France but relocated to the United States in the 1980s. They married soon after and started their family. The Dira family was known for being close-knit and happy. Patrick grew up surrounded by love, care, and mutual respect. A kind, intelligent, and sociable young man, he did well academically and could easily become the center of any social gathering. From childhood, he had a strong bond with his parents, who spared no effort or expense to ensure he received a good education and developed into an upstanding individual. Max Dira worked in construction and was highly regarded in his field. Although not wealthy by big city standards, the family lived comfortably. After graduating high school, Patrick chose to study construction at university, aiming to follow in his father's footsteps. While Patrick attended university, his parents decided to divorce after nearly 25 years together. Remarkably, they separated amicably without any scandals or disputes over property. His mother moved to Deltona, a quiet town on Florida's east coast, where she soon remarried. Despite their separation, all family members remained close and maintained friendly relations. Patrick stayed with his father in Miami. They worked together and were respected professionals within the construction industry, despite their personal circumstances. They kept in regular contact, frequently calling and communicating, always ready to assist when necessary. Patrick often visited his mother in Deltona, sharing updates about his life, his joys, and experiences. He delighted in telling her about meeting the girl of his dreams. Thanks to his French-Spanish heritage, Patrick had an eye-catching appearance from a young age. He was quite popular with the opposite sex, but he valued the example set by his family. Consequently, Patrick did not pursue frivolous relationships. He yearned for a meaningful connection and a strong family of his own. Patrick created an account on a dating website based on a friend's recommendation, though he wasn't entirely convinced it would help him find his soulmate. One evening in June 2017, while browsing through profiles without much optimism, a photo caught his eye: a captivating brunette with mesmerizing eyes and an enchanting smile. Intrigued, Patrick decided to message her. The woman in the photo was Jessica Devaney, born in 1988 in Orlando, Florida. After high school, she attended a local university where she studied banking before securing a job at a bank branch in her hometown. Jessica was immediately drawn to Patrick's profile as well. They exchanged messages on the website for several days before deciding to swap phone numbers. Over the next few weeks, they spoke every evening for hours, discussing various topics and forming a deep mutual sympathy and trust. Realizing their connection was genuine, they decided to meet in person despite living in different parts of the state. They chose a location roughly halfway between them for their first date. On that first date, Patrick realized that Jessica was the girl he had been searching for all along, and someone he no longer wanted to let go. She also liked him immediately, though Jessica was slightly confused by the age difference, as she was 4 years older than Patrick. On his way home, Patrick called his mother to share that he had met the girl of his dreams, someone he wished to marry and start a family with. Patricia heard the joy and excitement in her son's voice, recognized his seriousness, and felt happy for him. Their long-distance relationship lasted several months, presenting challenges because the couple could only see each other on weekends. They usually met somewhere neutral, renting a hotel room in a cozy, secluded place to enjoy each other's company. However, by Sunday night, they parted ways since they needed to return to work on Monday morning. In December 2017, Patrick moved to Deltona, where his mother lived, to be closer to Jessica. He bought a house in a quiet neighborhood and began renovations to create a cozy nest for Jessica's eventual move. But Jessica could not leave her job immediately. Thus, they planned a housewarming party for early spring the next year. On New Year's Eve, which the couple celebrated together, Patrick prepared a surprise for Jessica. He arranged fireworks in the backyard of the house, and as she admired them, he got down on one knee and held out a box with a ring. He then asked her the most important question, whether she would become his lawful wife. Jessica felt incredibly happy and of course agreed. Patrick later admitted he had spent considerable time searching for an engagement ring but had not found one perfect enough in any jewelry store. To ensure he could propose before the new year, he chose the best available option but ordered an exclusive ring from a jewelry workshop, an original piece designed by himself. 2 months had passed since the engagement. Preparations for both the wedding and the upcoming housewarming were in full swing. The couple's choice of events had received their parents' approval, and they themselves were unspeakably happy, readying for a new stage in their lives. The young couple planned an extravagant celebration, either on the shores of the Atlantic Ocean in Miami or in France, where the groom's mother originated. On February 27, 2018, Max Dira, Patrick's father, received a call from a courier. Max's number was listed as an additional contact. The courier reported that Patrick's order had been delivered to the specified address. However, no one opened the door or answered the phone. This was highly unusual for Patrick, prompting concern from his father. As he was occupied at work and could not leave to pick up the order or check on his son, Max decided to contact Jessica, his future daughter-in-law. Max called Jessica with anxiety in his voice, expressing that he could not reach Patrick. Jessica herself had been trying to get in touch with her fiancé since morning, but had not received any replies or calls back. Upon hearing this, Max stated that something must have happened to Patrick. Alarmed by this suggestion, Jessica dropped everything she was doing and headed toward Patrick's house as quickly as she could. Upon arriving at Patrick's house, she immediately noticed his car parked in the driveway, indicating he had not left home. Armed with her own key, Jessica entered the yard and called out repeatedly for her fiancé, but received no response. She cautiously opened the front door, only to be confronted by a horrifying sight. Her fiancé lay motionless near the entrance in a pool of blood. Jessica promptly called emergency services. However, paramedics who arrived on the scene were unable to assist Patrick and could only declare him dead upon arrival. By the time police officers reached Patrick's residence, a heartbroken Jessica was found sobbing uncontrollably in the backyard, the very place where Patrick had proposed 2 months earlier. One of the attending officers approached her gently and began their inquiries into this tragic event. She only glanced at him and remarked that she knew who had decimated her lover and upended her entire existence, a wealthy and influential ex-boyfriend. To comprehend this perplexing case and to decipher who might want to kill a young man who, at first glance, seemed to have neither adversaries nor ill-wishers, it is necessary to rewind a bit to when he and Jessica initially crossed paths. At that time, Jessica was entangled in a relationship with Gregory Bender, a prosperous businessman managing his own investment fund. Jessica encountered Gregory during her college years. He was 20 years her senior and quickly mesmerized the young woman. The businessman courted her lavishly, offering extravagant gifts and taking her to upscale resorts. Jessica believed she had discovered true love. However, soon she started noticing peculiarities in his demeanor. Gregory sought to dominate every aspect of her life, vigilantly tracking where she went and whom she associated with. Their relationship persisted for almost 8 years, during which time Gregory never introduced Jessica to his family or friends. Their interactions were strictly on his terms, meeting or going on vacations only at his convenience. Rarely did he invite her over to his residence. Jessica craved a conventional family life and children. Each time she raised the subject, Bender dismissed the idea as untimely. When she attempted to end the relationship, Gregory proposed with a ring. Jessica accepted the proposal, but nothing changed. They still lived separately and only met when he needed her. One day, Gregory was involved in an automobile accident that left him hospitalized. Upon hearing this news, Jessica hurried to see him, but first decided to stop by his house for some essential items for Gregory. There, Jessica encountered an unfamiliar woman and inquired about her identity. Instead of responding directly, the woman asked a similar question back. Jessica displayed the engagement ring on her finger and announced that she was the fiancée of the house's owner. In response, the woman laughed and exhibited her own ring, proclaiming herself as Bender's legal wife, Diora Sanchez Bender. Shattered by this revelation, Jessica resolved immediately to end all ties with the businessman who had deceived her for so many years. The boyfriend began to actively pursue Jessica, begging her to return and promising that he would divorce Diora in the near future so they could get married. Jessica believed him once more. However, time passed and nothing about their relationship changed. Eventually, tired of the lack of progress, Jessica filled out a questionnaire on a dating site where she soon met Patrick. After starting to communicate with Patrick, she firmly decided to break up with Gregory and informed him of her decision. Unfortunately, Gregory did not want to let her go. He became an obsessive stalker. Initially, Bender simply persuaded Jessica to come back and try again, promising once more to divorce his wife. When persuasion failed, he moved on to threats and harassment. Realizing these tactics were ineffective, Gregory decided to find out more about his rival, Patrick, about whom he knew nothing at the time. Gregory turned to professionals who hacked into Jessica's account to uncover who she was communicating with. After discovering Patrick's identity and obtaining his contact information, Gregory began sending threatening messages demanding that Patrick break up with Jessica and referring to her as his fiancée. Patrick remained calm and unreactive to the threats, believing they would not escalate beyond verbal harassment. However, Jessica was frightened because she understood that her ex-boyfriend was capable of anything. He was a man with substantial financial resources and connections, and owned a large collection of firearms. Jessica had suggested ending things with Patrick to prevent anyone from getting hurt, but Patrick refused to consider it. Consequently, they decided it was time to involve the police, providing evidence that Gregory Bender was stalking and threatening them. The couple successfully obtained a restraining order against Gregory, which also required him to surrender all firearms stored in his home. Following this legal action, things appeared to calm down for a while. The lovers began to believe the stalker had finally left them alone. Jessica persuaded Patrick that it was crucial to install CCTV cameras around and inside the house because she feared Gregory might violate the restraining order. On February 27, 2018, during the initial examination of the crime scene, criminalists immediately ruled out robbery. By the nature of the mutilation, they concluded that the murder had a personal motive and that the perpetrator clearly harbored intense hatred for the victim. The body of the 25-year-old man revealed 4 gunshot wounds, 1 in the thigh, 1 in the chest, and 2 in the head. Experts also identified injuries and bruises consistent with a fall from a ladder. The body was found lying on the floor between the front door and the stairs leading to the second floor, suggesting the killer had likely snuck into the house and waited upstairs. When Patrick entered and began ascending the stairs, he was met by his assailant. The intruder fired a bullet into Patrick's thigh, causing him to tumble down the stairs. Following him, the perpetrator fired another shot into his chest before finishing him with 2 shots to the head. Although no murder weapon was recovered, it was determined to be a rare model of pistol that is difficult to obtain. The first shell casing was found on the second floor. 2 more were located downstairs, but a 4th casing was missing. Despite Jessica's assertions about knowing who killed her fiancé, initial suspicion fell on Patrick's neighbor, with whom he had a serious conflict months prior. This neighbor was a U.S. Army veteran with combat experience who had developed a mental disorder from severe injuries and concussions sustained during service. In December 2017, just months before the murder, this veteran had mistakenly fired at a new neighbor, believing him to be an intruder. Fortunately, no one was hit, but the incident led to his hospitalization in a psychiatric facility. Adept with firearms and capable of acquiring rare gun models, he became a prime suspect in Patrick's murder, despite Jessica's accusations pointing elsewhere. Once he returned home, Patrick found himself constantly watched. The neighbor, struggling with mental illness, called Patrick a spy and vowed to expose him. His unstable imagination provided a potential motive, prompting authorities to detain and interrogate him. The neighbor openly expressed his dislike for Patrick, but maintained a solid alibi at the time of the murder, corroborated by several eyewitnesses. With CCTV recordings missing and no physical evidence such as fingerprints, shoe prints, or DNA at the scene, it became evident that the murder had been meticulously planned. Despite suspicions surrounding Gregory Bender, it appeared he might evade justice for the time being. The police decided to adopt a covert approach, asking Jessica to engage her former lover in a conversation. She agreed without hesitation. Jessica called Gregory, dramatically blaming him for everything that had occurred. She wept and repeatedly questioned why he had done it. Gregory, however, seemed to anticipate the investigators' intentions, feigning ignorance of her accusations. When Jessica directly accused him of killing her fiancé, he pretended to be shocked and offered condolences. Attempts to provoke a confession or trick him into making a mistake proved fruitless. Lacking concrete reasons to detain or further question him, police could only summon Gregory for testimony when required by law. He complied with restraining orders and appeared to have moved on from his ex-girlfriend long ago. While detectives struggled to find leads, a breakthrough came when Diora Sanchez Bender contacted them with crucial information regarding Patrick Dara's case. She was promptly invited for an interview at the police station, where she revealed critical details about events occurring shortly before the crime. In her husband's office, Dora had discovered a peculiar notebook. Upon examining it, she found a detailed layout of an unfamiliar house accompanied by a series of procedural steps. Initially, she had paid little attention to it. However, when Dora saw a news report detailing the brutal murder of a young man and the story displayed the layout of his house, she immediately recalled the drawings she had seen by her unfaithful husband, with whom she was nearing divorce. Recognizing the significance, she decided to inform the investigators. This information provided the police with sufficient grounds to search the house of the alleged perpetrator. At the house, authorities located the mysterious notebook that Dora had mentioned. Although the pages containing the house plan and additional records were initially missing, they were soon found in a trash can within the office. Gregory had apparently attempted, but forgotten, to dispose of them properly, having merely torn out the pages, crumpled them, and discarded them in the bin. He seemed confident that no search would be conducted, as he believed there was no incriminating evidence against him. The recovered pages, aside from the house's layout, contained an elaborate outline of the crime itself, revealing that the perpetrator had meticulously planned every detail over an extended period. The document specified actions such as disabling his phone, wearing gloves, and applying a special substance to shoe soles to avoid leaving footprints. It was clear from these records that Gregory had tracked his victim, knew Patrick's return schedule, and was aware of surveillance cameras inside and around Patrick's home. He also ensured that all incriminating items, such as weapons used in the crime, soiled clothes, shoes, and gloves, were disposed of. Gregory's downfall stemmed from his failure to destroy these records in time and his wife's curiosity. Furthermore, police discovered the fourth missing shell casing inside a cigar box on Gregory's table, evidently intended as a macabre trophy. Forensic analysis confirmed that this casing matched those from the crime scene. During trial preparations, defense attorneys attempted to shift blame toward Jessica. However, the evidence against Gregory was substantial enough to proceed with his arrest and trial. The primary challenge lay in the circumstantial nature of the evidence, as neither the murder weapon nor direct proof linked him physically to Patrick's residence, and no eyewitnesses had observed the attack. Despite these challenges, proceedings began against Bender, though proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt remained difficult. Crucial links were initially unbridgeable, making it hard to establish absolute conclusiveness. Until May 2021, more than 3 years after the crime, Gregory employed top lawyers who took considerable time to prepare a thorough defense. Throughout this period, he appeared optimistic, seemingly believing he could evade accountability. Jessica played a pivotal role as a witness, providing detailed testimony about her long-standing relationship with Gregory, including how she discovered he was married and attempted to end their involvement. She also recounted instances of harassment and threats against both her and Patrick. Jessica submitted critical evidence, including saved screenshots of correspondence and phone records, which became central to the prosecution's case. In response, Bender's attorneys attempted to shift all responsibility onto Jessica, arguing that her actions had provoked Gregory. They claimed that by registering on a dating site and beginning a relationship with Patrick before formally ending things with Gregory, Jessica had wounded his pride and ego. Additionally, the defense accused her of mercantilism, emphasizing her enjoyment of receiving expensive gifts from a wealthy suitor. During one session, Dora Sanchez, Gregory's now ex-wife, was called as a witness. The previously indifferent defendant became animated and unexpectedly professed his love for her. Moved by this confession, Sanchez appeared to reconsider her stance on testifying against Gregory. She became confused during her testimony, citing forgetfulness, and eventually stated that she had lived with Gregory for many years and doubted he was capable of murder. The defense also attempted to challenge the legality of the search conducted at Gregory's home. Despite the ex-wife's unexpected statement and the lack of direct evidence, the jury found Gregory Bender guilty of first-degree murder after hours of deliberation. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As the judge read the sentence, Bender stared at Jessica intently, unblinking, a glare that made her feel nauseated and nearly triggered a panic attack. Sitting beside Patrick's mother, Jessica sobbed and choked, overwhelmed by emotion. Despite repeated attempts by Bender and his well-funded legal team to appeal or have the case reviewed, all appeals were rejected. The widespread public attention the case received contributed to this outcome, as a wealthy millionaire had cold-bloodedly murdered a working-class man and attempted to evade justice. Patrick Deer's story was extensively covered in the media. As Gregory Bender remains incarcerated, Jessica Devaney reports feeling safe. She continues to honor Patrick's memory, wearing the engagement ring he gave her along with another piece of jewelry he had intended to gift her. Jessica maintains a close relationship with Patrick's parents, who treat her as their own daughter. Moving on to the next case. The case of Shibli Siddique Hridoy. Bangladesh's 18-year-old Siddique was a very good boy, honest and hardworking, but his honesty ultimately cost him his life. Siddique's full name was Shibli Siddique Hridoy, and he was only 18 years old. He was born in Chattogram City, Bangladesh, one of the world's oldest seaports with active natural harbors for centuries. Siddique belonged to a very poor family, where his father, Shafiq, was a truck driver and his mother, Naida Kha, was a housewife. Siddique was their only child. Since childhood, Siddique had a strong passion for studying and harbored big dreams for his life. To pursue his dreams, he started working at a poultry farm at a very young age. The money his father earned was barely enough to cover household expenses, so Siddique began working at a nearby poultry farm to pay for his college fees. Siddique quickly became skilled in his work, and the owner of the poultry farm promoted him directly from a regular worker to a manager. Even after receiving this position, Siddique showed no signs of arrogance and continued to work diligently. During his time at the poultry farm, Siddique managed to save some money for his college fees and also made several friends there, all of whom were 5 to 6 years older than him. However, they all respected Siddique and worked under him because he was educated and took his managerial duties seriously. He also ensured that others worked honestly while on duty. Nevertheless, sometimes, due to Siddique's honesty, conflicts arose with his own friends at the farm. Although these conflicts were not major and were usually resolved within the farm premises, Siddique had no other distractions besides his work and studies. If he ever had urgent matters, he managed them well and always made it home on time before it got too dark. On the morning of August 28, 2023, Siddique went to work and performed his usual duties just like any other day. However, that evening, he did not return home on time as expected. At first, his parents assumed he had been given some important task at the poultry farm where he worked. But as time passed, their concern grew. Between 11:30 p.m. and 12 a.m., his parents tried calling him 2 or 3 times, but Siddique did not answer, which was highly unusual for him. Although Siddique did not answer his parents' calls, they still tried to remain positive as the night passed. However, Siddique had still not returned home the next morning. His parents tried calling him once again, but he did not answer. They also tried calling the owner of the poultry farm, but his phone was unreachable as well. Sadiq's parents searched around their home and asked people near the poultry farm about their son, but no one knew anything about Sadiq. Since they could not find any information about him, their worry increased. Amidst this anxiety, on the morning of the 29th, they received a call from Sadiq's number. Seeing this, Sadiq's parents felt slightly relieved. However, as soon as they answered the call, they sensed that their son sounded panicked. Sadiq told his mother that he had been kidnapped and had been inside a car for the last 12 hours. He said his captors were beating him, and he was speaking to his mother in their presence while hiding. But the call suddenly disconnected before Sadiq could say more. After this, Sadiq's parents knew that their son had been kidnapped and was in serious danger. The kidnapper himself cut Sadiq's phone, and since Sadiq was the sole heir of his family, his parents were extremely worried. Sadiq's mother, Naida, continued calling her son, but the calls were being disconnected from the other end. After this, she was about to go to the police to file a complaint when she received another call from the same number. But this time it was not Sadiq, but a stranger speaking. The person on the other end said that they had Sadiq in their custody and that if the family wanted his safety, they should arrange 1.5 million taka quickly. The location to deliver the money would be provided on the next call. Sadiq's family was very poor. They did not even have 1 lakh taka. But because it concerned the life of their only son, they started gathering money. For the next 3 days, they put all their effort into collecting money. They asked for money from relatives and neighbors, but from the 28th to the 31st, they could not even gather 2 lakh taka, let alone 1.5 million taka. On August 31st, 2023, the kidnappers contacted Sadiq's parents again and demanded money. This time, Sadiq's parents told the kidnappers directly that they could not gather that much money. After hearing this, the kidnappers compromised and said they would release Sadiq if the parents brought them 1 lakh taka quickly. It was unusual for kidnappers to act this way, but it seemed they were already aware of Sadiq's family's financial situation. The kidnappers had already reduced the ransom amount to 200,000 taka. But even then, Sadiq's parents told the kidnappers that 200,000 taka was also too much for their family. In response, the kidnappers said, "Okay, but if you don't give us the full amount, we will kill Sadiq." After hearing this, Sadiq's parents pleaded, "Do not harm our son. We need a 4-day extension to gather 200,000 taka." Now, Sadiq's parents also borrowed money from shopkeepers to gather the remaining amount. Some people understood their compulsion and gave them money, but some could not. However, after searching everywhere, they managed to gather 200,000 Bangladeshi taka within 3 days. They were now just waiting for the kidnappers' call. On September 4th in the afternoon, the kidnappers called and summoned Sadiq's father to the Bandarban district headquarters with the money. Additionally, they threatened again that if he disclosed anything to the police, Sadiq would not survive. Since Sadiq's parents wanted to save their son, they did not take any risks and went directly to the location specified by the kidnappers, paying the ransom. There, Sadiq's father waited for a while. Then 2 masked kidnappers arrived. They did not talk much to Sadiq's father and just took the money from him. However, as the kidnappers were leaving, they assured Sadiq's father that his son would reach home before him. Hearing this, Sadiq's father felt immense relief and hurried home. But upon reaching, he found that Sadiq had not arrived yet. He asked his wife about their son's whereabouts, and upon hearing this, Naida became anxious. Subsequently, Sadiq's father shared the entire story with his wife. After hearing everything, Sadiq's mother became even more anxious. Yet both of them waited outside their home's door until evening, hoping for Sadiq's return. By now, night had fallen and they had received no further information about Sadiq. Similarly, the night passed, and by then, Sadiq's parents had lost all hope and their condition had deteriorated to tears. Up until now, even Sadiq's relatives had learned about his disappearance, and one of those relatives advised Shafiq to lodge a complaint with the police. Initially, Sadiq's father was also afraid because the kidnappers had warned him that if he tried to tell the police anything, they would harm Sadiq. But then, on September 7th, Sadiq's father called his son's phone, although the kidnappers had forbidden it. There was no response. From August 28th to September 7th, Sadiq had been missing for more than 10 days, and the situation was becoming extremely difficult. So on the evening of September 7th, Sadiq's parents decided to go to the local police station. There, they recounted everything that had happened over the past 10 days to the police. Initially, upon hearing all this, the police were quite angry with Sadiq's parents for not informing them of the incident earlier. But when Sadiq's parents mentioned the threat given by the kidnappers, the police understood what a parent must be going through at such a difficult time. After that, the police quickly assembled a team to search for Sadiq and began their investigation. During the investigation, the police first checked Sadiq's background, such as his behavior in college, his friends, and how he lived with his family. It was revealed that Sadiq was a good boy who neither had enmity with anyone, nor engaged in fights with anyone. However, during the police investigation, Sadiq's mother, Naida Acker, remembered something. Before moving forward, she told the police about a fight Sadiq had with his friends inside the poultry farm. Upon hearing this, the police immediately went to the poultry farm and apprehended 6 workers who were employed there. Each of them was interrogated individually. In the initial investigation, these people tried to prove themselves innocent. But in the end, when the police pressured them, 4 out of the 6 boys confessed to their crime. The names of these 4 boys were Umang Ching Mama, Suing Mama, Anumara, and Yukai Mara. The police arrested these 4 on charges of kidnapping. During the investigation, the police asked all of them about Sadiq's location, but none of them said a single word. However, after being kept in jail and tortured for quite some time, they opened their mouths and also revealed the identities of their other 2 accomplices. On September 11th, they began to recount how, on the night of August 28th, when Sadiq was returning home, they kidnapped him to take revenge. Their plan was to kidnap Sadiq, beat him, and then demand money from his parents in exchange for his release. Initially, everything was going according to plan, and these people were going to get the ransom money. However, during this time, Sadiq saw the faces of 2 of them, which made them think that Sadiq now knew everything. Therefore, they feared that if they let Sadiq go, he would inform the police, and they would be caught. So after that, they used a knife to attack Sadiq and assaulted him repeatedly from his face to his feet with the knife. As a result, Sadiq bled heavily and died on the spot. Now, the police and Sadiq's family had learned that Sadiq was no longer alive. The police are investigating this case as a murder case. After that, the police asked these individuals about Sadiq's body, to which his killers replied that after killing Sadiq, they had cut his body into pieces and thrown them on a hill. The police went with these individuals to that hill and found some body parts there. But among those pieces, the police found one complete body a little farther away, but its face was completely disfigured. The face of that body was so badly mutilated that the police could not identify whether it was Sadiq or someone else. However, after examining the clothes on that body, its height, and some other factors, the police believed that it was Sadiq's body. Sadiq's family confirmed that yes, this was indeed their son. Now the police had arrested all of them on murder charges. During custody, Umang Ching Mara made several revelations in the Sadiq murder case. He stated that he had a good friendship with Sadiq, but 2 months ago they had a disagreement over some issues. After that, Umang Ching decided to take revenge on Sadiq. Additionally, he mentioned in his statement that he himself had killed Sadiq with his own hands and even ate small pieces of his body. Afterward, this was a horrifying and shameful act. But as soon as this news appeared in the media, protests started across the country. During this time, people could not tolerate their anger. And when the police were taking all these accused on the evening of September 11th, the crowd snatched Umang Ching from the police and beat him so severely that he died on the spot before the court could sentence him. People themselves gave him the punishment for his deeds. Moreover, the police managed to remove all the other accused with great difficulty and put them behind bars. Since then, there have been no updates on this case. However, Sadiq's parents lost a son who loved them dearly and was very serious about his future. So with this, the Shibli Sadiq Hridoy murder case comes to a close. Moving on to the next case. The Sharp family. The Sharp family lived in Victoria, Australia, a region known for its peaceful beaches and quiet suburban life. John Sharp, his pregnant wife Anna, and their beloved daughter Gracie appeared to be a happy family. Yet this image was soon shattered, giving rise to one of the most heart-wrenching cases in Australian history. In March 2004, the Sharp family home became a crime scene. Anna Kemp and her daughter Gracie vanished without a trace. Born on February 28, 1967, John Sharp grew up in a world familiar to many. His childhood was marked by the usual ups and downs, aspirations shaped by his surroundings, and the pursuit of happiness supported by his family. Raised in a community where neighbors knew each other by name and children played freely outdoors, John's formative years seemed filled with simple joys. As John entered adolescence, those around him observed his transition from a bright-eyed child into a quiet, somewhat introverted young man. Intelligent and courteous, yet often on the periphery as if observing the world from a distance, John was present but somehow apart. It was as though he were searching for something he could not find among those around him. During these formative years, John's path began to subtly diverge, laying the groundwork for the man he would become. His silent observations and unspoken thoughts simmering beneath a calm exterior might have been early indications of a coming storm. Anna Kemp, who came from New Zealand, brought with her the promise of new beginnings when she arrived in Australia. Her infectious smile and zest for life touched those around her, including John Sharp. They met at the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, where they both worked. Anna was 4 years John's senior. Laughter over coffee and long walks along the beach eventually culminated in their wedding day. Anna's lively spirit contrasted sharply with John's quiet introspection. Yet their paths were destined to converge, igniting a tragic sequence of events. Perhaps it was the allure of opposites attracting that drew them together, or perhaps something deeper, a shared longing for connection and understanding. They married in October 1994 and lived in various locations around the Mornington Peninsula area of South Melbourne. Their future appeared bright, full of endless possibilities. However, beneath the joys of marriage, early signs of strain began to appear. The arrival of a child heralds a new chapter for a family. Gracie, born in August 2002 with her innocent eyes and radiant smile, became the center of John and Anna's world. Yet the joys of parenthood also brought challenges, casting shadows over their once peaceful family life. Every home has its secrets, private sorrows, and silent struggles. For John and Anna, the dream of a happy family life in the suburbs of the Mornington Peninsula soon faced trials that tested their bond. Gracie was diagnosed with hip dysplasia, requiring a corrective orthopedic harness and causing her continuous discomfort. Her early months were marked by relentless crying and sleepless nights, pushing her parents to their limits. Once the harness was removed, eating difficulties emerged and sleep problems persisted. Anna sought professional assistance for these challenges. The family relocated one final time to a residence on Prince Street in Mornington, a quiet coastal town about 35 miles south of Melbourne. This home would tragically become the final setting for Anna and Gracie. In November 2003, Anna became pregnant with their second child, and Gracie was just 15 months old. Anna was overjoyed. She was a devoted mother, and Gracie was her world. She had always wanted more than one child, hoping her daughter would not be alone, so that when she and her husband were no longer present, Gracie would still have someone by her side. The facade of family harmony lasted until March 21, 2004, at a nephew's birthday celebration, the last time Anna was seen alive. Guests observed no signs of tension between Anna and her seemingly devoted husband, John. The following day, Anna dropped Gracie off at daycare and made plans to meet a friend. Her final contact with anyone outside her marriage occurred the next day during a call to her private health insurance company, where she discussed extending coverage to include their expected child. Soon after, John contacted Anna's friends, claiming she had left him for another man and had left Gracie with him. He also reached out to Anna's mother, stating that Anna had abandoned him for another man and that he was unaware of her whereabouts, though he anticipated she would return for their daughter within the week. John continued bringing Gracie to daycare, telling the staff that he and his wife had separated, meaning Gracie would not be returning. Anna's family received emails from her, and her mother received a bouquet of flowers from her daughter, yet there was no phone call. The initial shock and confusion among Anna's friends and family quickly turned to worry. How could a devoted mother and her child vanish without a word? By May 2004, Sharp, speaking to the media, portrayed himself as a man tormented by the disappearance of his family. He told the local paper, in a public plea while holding a photo of Gracie, that he continued to love Anna, stating, "Anna, our marriage may be over, but I still love you, and you are the mother of our beautiful daughter Gracie, whom we both adore more than anyone else." He claimed he had spoken to Anna a week earlier, and that she had left him for another man. He asked anyone with information to come forward. He said, My biggest fear is being denied a part of Gracie's future. His demeanor and statements, however, seemed peculiar, striking a discordant note and inviting scrutiny regarding the authenticity of his narrative. Despite proclaiming their marital dissolution, an inconsistency arose in his premature use of the past tense when referring to his family, a detail that did not escape police notice. Behind the scenes, law enforcement began to dismantle John Sharp's carefully constructed account. Each unanswered question hinted at a darker reality. What secrets were buried within the Sharp family? Anna and her mother had called each other every few days. When Anna missed several of these calls, her mother grew concerned. She contacted Sharp, who offered weak explanations, such as being busy taking Gracie to daycare, which only heightened her worry. Anna's devout Catholic beliefs, combined with the unlikely notion of an affair and her sudden disappearance while 20 weeks pregnant and without Gracie, fueled her family's distrust of Sharp's account. This distrust was further compounded by the impersonal nature of the email and the gift, with no accompanying phone contact. With Anna still missing, her mother alerted the police in New Zealand, prompting communication with authorities in Mornington. Confronted by police, Sharp claimed that Anna had gotten into a blue car and relocated to Chelsea with their daughter, denying any knowledge of or involvement in their disappearance. The search for Anna and Gracie commenced with urgency. Missing persons officer Norelle Fraser said detectives had to maintain an open mind and not assume the mother and daughter were deceased, as they had only been reported missing. She noted that Anna's bank account had been used intermittently and her phone had been used once or twice. "We kept thinking, is she alive?" she said. But as days passed, hope began to fade, replaced by the grim realization that the truth they sought might be unbearably painful. Sharp quickly became the prime suspect, as there was no evidence to support his version of events. The investigation's pace accelerated as new information came to light. Friends and acquaintances began to step forward, their testimonies revealing the mounting tensions behind the closed doors of the Sharp household. One friend confessed, mentioning that the couple was going through a tough time. "I never imagined it could lead to this." Investigators intensified pressure on Sharp, attempting to make him nervous so that he might slip up. He lived as a recluse and rarely entertained guests. Their family home was oppressively quiet. John was shadowed by undercover officers to monitor his movements. Soon, a breakthrough occurred in the case. To mislead investigators, Sharp intermittently used Anna's phone and bank card, creating the illusion that she remained active across the southeast suburbs of Victoria. However, this deception collapsed under police surveillance, which captured Sharp attempting to conceal evidence. Cameras recorded him driving to Chelsea Beach and retrieving a white plastic bag from the bushes near the public toilet. Inside the bag, he took Anna's phone and made a call. He then withdrew cash from the nearest ATM before disposing of the bag, phone, and card in a trash receptacle in Mount Martha. Afterwards, he returned home and contacted the missing persons unit, claiming his wife had just called him and withdrawn money from their joint account. But the investigators already knew the truth. The evidence was irrefutable, pointing to a conclusion that was almost unimaginable. Lacking sufficient evidence to charge Sharp with murder and unable to determine his motive, investigators hoped he might lead them to the bodies. Yet, as days passed with no action, they decided to arrest him. On June 10th, Sharp underwent another round of questioning. He continued to insist that Anna had willingly left on March 23rd. Investigators, however, remained skeptical, noting his emotional detachment regarding his wife's alleged affair and her departure with their daughter. Discrepancies in Sharp's timeline began to surface. The man who claimed ignorance now appeared as a master of evasion. Norelle Fraser remarked about Sharp, "I don't think anybody would know how John felt about anything. He was a closed book. He was very insular. He was a loner. He didn't show any emotion. He showed no personality." Investigators sought another method to elicit a confession. They brought in his parents and showed them footage of John at Chelsea Beach, then asked them to speak with their son. The presentation of this undeniable evidence marked a turning point in the investigation. About an hour after his parents left, John began to speak, realizing the inevitability of his situation. His final defenses of denial and self-preservation crumbled, exposing the truth of his psyche, a man ensnared by his darkest impulses. What had turned his heart so cold that he became a stranger even to those who thought they knew him best? Sometimes the gravest dangers lie where we least expect them. Sharp's confession revealed the reality of what had occurred within the walls of the Sharp home. He told police that for several months he had fantasized about murdering his wife before ultimately killing her. The pressures of adjusting to life with a baby, sleepless nights, financial strain, and the monotony of daily routine added layers of stress that pushed the family to a breaking point. Sharp explained that he killed Anna because she was controlling and moody and was getting on his nerves. Their marriage had been unhappy. Sharp perceived his wife's assertive personality as undermining his masculinity, stating that Anna used to wear the pants in the family. Sharp told investigators that Anna's pregnancy had come as a surprise to him. He did not want another child and viewed the pregnancy as an added burden, harboring silent resentment toward Anna and their unborn child rather than expressing his concerns. He even questioned whether the child was his. John was self-employed as a conveyancer, and the financial responsibilities of a growing family seemed to overwhelm him. He appeared increasingly withdrawn. Anna tried to bridge the widening distance between them, but as she reached out, John's retreat into himself grew more pronounced. With each passing day, he became more distant, a prisoner of his own mind, trapped by thoughts he could not share and emotions he could not express. Anna sought to maintain her family, unaware of the darkness consuming her husband's heart. The gap between John, isolated in his inner world, and Anna, attending to their home and children, widened, filled with unspoken words and unacknowledged fears. Anna found herself met with silence, indifference, or hostility despite her efforts. In early 2003, Sharp made a foreboding and unusual purchase, a high-powered spear gun from a sports shop, Philip Marine in Mornington, something he had never shown interest in before. This purchase marked the beginning of a dark and tragic chapter. Sharp spent countless hours in their backyard mastering the spear gun, familiarizing himself with its mechanics. In the following days, a domestic dispute escalated into unimaginable horror. Gerald Kemp, Anna's brother, told reporters that in February 2004, Anna had an ultrasound to determine the baby's gender, but Sharp did not accompany her to the appointment. Upon returning, she expected her husband to show eagerness or interest, only to find he asked nothing and displayed no curiosity. Distressed by his apathy, Anna confronted Sharp, warning that if he continued to be indifferent toward their daughter and the unborn child, she would leave him. They went to bed around 9 or 10 p.m. Anna quickly fell asleep while John remained awake, consumed by thoughts of the argument and his dissatisfaction with their marriage. Eventually, he went to the backyard garage and retrieved the spear gun, which he rarely used outside of target practice. In a chilling sequence, Sharp crept back into the room where Anna slept peacefully, aiming the charged spear gun at her while their 20-month-old daughter slept nearby. The first shot did not kill her. She was still breathing. With grim resolve, he reloaded and fired again, fatally wounding Anna and the unborn child she carried. Afterward, he covered her with towels and spent the remainder of the night sleeping on the sofa downstairs. The next morning, Sharp attempted to remove the spears, but only succeeded in extracting the shafts. He then dropped Gracie off at daycare and turned away a TV antenna technician Anna had booked, using her absence as an excuse while her body remained in the bedroom. Under the cover of night, he buried Anna in a hastily dug shallow grave in the garden. Officer Fraser said, "It's almost difficult to describe, but to hear a man talk about murdering his wife who was 3 months pregnant, that was hard enough, but he said it with no emotion whatsoever." She compared his confession to saying what he'd had for breakfast that morning. The days that followed took Gracie and revisited the marine supply store for another spear. Said Sharp told the police, "You're almost like an automatic pilot sort of thing. I can't really remember much of what I thought of anything, just apart from the sort of crazy sensation. It was totally emotional." He said that for the next 4 days, voices in his head debated Gracie's fate. A few days after the murder, he started thinking Gracie needed to be with her mom. "It was sort of in and out of my head all week. I could hear things going through my head, the voices saying, 'You can't do it, you can do it, you've got to do it.' Every option was coming up." On March 27th, after putting Gracie into her cot, drank a few glasses of whiskey and cola, confessing that he did this to numb his senses for what he was about to do. Then he went to the garage. Armed once again with the spear gun, he inflicted unimaginable terror on Gracie, who endured multiple shots before her tragic death at her father's hands. Same as Anna, Gracie didn't die at once. After the 4th shot, she was dead. The next morning, Sharp returned to Gracie's bedroom. He could not bear looking at, so he had to hold a towel in front of his face. Then he removed the bolts. Concluding his macabre errands, acquired a chainsaw at a local Bunnings Warehouse hardware store in Frankston. He unearthed Anna's remains from their garden. He'd undisposed of Anna's and Gracie's bodies in garbage bags at the Mornington Refuge Transfer Station. He also discarded the spear gun, the chainsaw, and Gracie's clothes and toys. "I have a bootload of hard waste," he told the attendant. Officer Fraser said, "This is his wife that's pregnant." I kept thinking what was coming next, and then he told us about little Gracie. It's the most difficult interview I have ever listened to. Remember, at one stage there was a break in the interview. I went to the ladies' toilets, and I just put my head in my hands. I couldn't listen. Sharp then called Anna's friends and family with a fabricated story of her affair. Her friends said that immediately alarm bells rang, and her hairs on the back of her neck stood up because there was no way Anna would leave Gracie behind. Following the murder of his daughter, made a second call to his mother-in-law telling her that Gracie was now with Anna in a bigger and better place. At his residence, Sharp crafted an email from Anna to her family in New Zealand to convince them she was fine. The messages didn't sound like her daughter had written them. Sharp used Anna's email account to contact her brother as well. In the email, he claimed she had departed with another man with whom she was expecting a child. One of the emails read, "Please respect and understand my wish for privacy and take comfort in the fact that I'm about to enjoy life like I have never before." This act only intensified the mystery surrounding Anna's prolonged silence. The family filed a missing person report on Anna. The interview uncovered that he had dotted down notes for his cover story. While analyzing Sharp's TV appearances, body language expert Dr. Cliff Lamsley said that this was a poor attempt at portraying concern and sadness. He was juggling his eyebrows, contorting his face, and using a tissue as a prop, though there was no moisture on his nose, no tears on his face. It's a convincing tactic that we rarely see with truth-tellers. The family told the police some disturbing facts. They believed Sharp's motive for murdering Anna was her discovery of Gracie's abuse by her husband. Although there was no evidence to support this theory, Sharp had a history of abusing the children of family and friends. Anna didn't know this before marrying him. One relative said, "We reckon she caught him. We think that's why he killed her." When one of Sharp's former victims reached adulthood, she confronted him about the abuse. In response, Sharp called her a derogatory name and told her she deserved it. The victim was tormented by the thought that had she reported the abuse earlier, the subsequent murders might have been prevented. Anna's brother later recalled that after the couple's honeymoon, she confided in their mother about her marriage, saying, "I think I've made a mistake." Her brother remarked that she simply carried on with the mistake, noting that she said there was no passion or love. Nevertheless, the couple continued their life together. An exhaustive 3-week search at a landfill in Mornington eventually led to the discovery of both Anna and Gracie's remains. Norelle Fraser, a member of Victoria Police for almost 30 years, recounted one case she would never forget, the Mornington Monster. During the search, Fraser spotted a blue bag. She opened it, but initially saw only a kitchen glove. The search continued, yet she had a gut feeling something was wrong, so she returned to the bag. She then realized that the glove was not what it appeared to be. She said, "It's funny, but I knew I'd find Anna, just an innate feeling I can't describe any better than that. And when I did find her, I couldn't leave her. I sat with the bag, waiting for the crime scene to arrive. I couldn't bear the thought of her being alone in the tip, without anyone with her. I've thought about it since, and I know it sounds bizarre, but I almost feel like Anna was reaching out to me. I was determined to make sure that Anna wouldn't end her life in this tip. I just knew I would find her, and I did." Soon she realized that Gracie must be nearby. "I put my head in my hands, and I just cried. I cried for what Anna had endured, for Anna's family, for humanity as a whole, I suppose." Anna and Gracie were laid to rest at Green Park Cemetery in New Zealand under Anna's maiden name, Kemp, marking their final resting place. The memorial also bears the name of Anna's unborn son, Francis. During the trial, the defense sought to shed light on John Sharp's psyche, illustrating the mental anguish that preceded the tragic events. From this perspective, Sharp's life was depicted as one fraught with mounting pressures, financial strain, marital discord, and a crippling sense of entrapment. The sentencing judge remarked that the crimes were too horrific to contemplate and singular in their barbarity, noting that Sharp had murdered his daughter simply to conceal his initial crime, a cruelty described as unspeakable. Forensic psychologist Carrie Dane said, "John Sharp was a quiet man, a shy man. Another way of looking at this was that he was actually quite socially inept. He didn't have much in the way of communication skills. He didn't have a lot of emotional intelligence. Psychiatrist Dr. Lester Walton described Sharp as dependent, passive, and a retiring individual, unable or unwilling to confront problems. Sharp believed that the only solution to his marital difficulties was to kill his wife. The Mornington Monster pleaded guilty to the murders of both Anna and Gracie, receiving 2 consecutive life sentences without eligibility for parole before 33 years. He will be eligible for parole in 2037. Sharp wept uncontrollably upon hearing the verdict and remains under protective custody while serving his sentence due to threats from other inmates. Sharp's elderly parents stated that John's crimes were horrific, emphasizing that he had imposed a life sentence upon himself and would live with the consequences for the rest of his life. One of Sharp's nieces remarked that his actions had stolen 3 beautiful and precious lives. Sharp's crime is regarded as Victoria's worst case of familicide. Investigator Shane Brundle reflected, "It's a healing process for us as much as anyone else, and with the passage of time, that gets a little easier. But it certainly makes you appreciate your own circumstances, your own family, and cherish every moment you have with them, knowing that there are people out there who resort to these sorts of means to eradicate their own families. It just makes you realize how special and important your own families are." Moving on to the next case. Vicky and Michael Roberts, an innocent victim of her spouse's perverse passion. It is said that an adult is simply impossible to re-educate because he or she has a formed personality with fixed views, way of thinking, preferences, character, and temperament. Nevertheless, some women are convinced that patience and pedagogical skill can work wonders. More experienced women understand that it is crucial from the very beginning to consider the man who stands beside her, to study his flaws, and to determine whether she can live with them, because love and passion will fade, and negative traits will only worsen with age. If the issue is not some minor flaw but real problems, such as addictions, a pathological tendency to lie, violence, and so forth, it is better to flee from such a person without looking back. However, in women, in such situations, the rescuer syndrome often manifests. An intense and irrepressible desire to help, even at the cost of their own well-being. It was this syndrome that ruined a young British woman named Vicky Roberts, who struggled for almost 3 years for her love, trying to re-educate her unfaithful husband with sadistic tendencies. Unfortunately for her, all her efforts resulted only in pain, humiliation, and cruelty. Vicky and Michael Roberts. Vicky Roberts, born Victoria Smith, was born in September 1984 in the county of Cheshire in northwest England. She was the younger of 2 daughters in a rather conservative and deeply religious family. Together with her sister, she attended a Christian school and also practiced music and sang in the choir. People around her described her as a very kind, friendly, and helpful girl, always ready to assist others. After finishing high school, Vicky went to university and simultaneously worked at one of the IKEA stores to pay for her education. It was there that she soon met a young man named Michael Roberts, with whom she initially began a friendly relationship. The new acquaintance was only a year older than Vicky. He, too, worked at IKEA alongside his studies, played sports, kept himself well-groomed, and was able to make a favorable impression on others. At first, the sociable and charismatic Michael seemed overly talkative and intrusive to the modest Vicky, but he quickly managed to win her attention and favor. It is worth mentioning a few words about Michael and his family. He was born in June 1983 in Warrington, Cheshire, and was the eldest of 2 sons in the family of a prominent chemical engineer. His parents raised their children with strictness, and high expectations were always placed on the eldest heir, who studied diligently at school, grew up ambitious, purposeful, and capable of achieving what he wanted. The young man always had many friends and could easily become the life of any gathering. But above all, he prided himself on his successes in love. Michael had a bright and attractive appearance, was tall, trim, with a good sense of humor and the ability to present himself favorably. In addition, this handsome man was also very intelligent, well-read, and could easily engage in conversation on any topic. From childhood, his parents had instilled in the eldest son that he was the best, the most beautiful, intelligent, and certain to succeed. All this likely provoked in him a narcissistic disorder, which progressed with age. At the same time, Michael was always very afraid of disappointing his father and mother, and therefore did everything to be the perfect son and fulfill all their expectations. Roberts had never had a permanent girlfriend. He regularly changed girlfriends and mistresses, could maintain several relationships simultaneously so that none of his lovers realized she was not the only one. The young man was confident in his own irresistibility, could find a way to any girl, and particularly enjoyed conquering unattainable girls. He perceived this process as a kind of game or competition. Just such a modest and unattainable girl was Vicky, whom Michael decided to conquer by all means. At first, she stubbornly kept her distance and refused even innocent invitations to walk after work or have coffee somewhere. Smith spent almost all her time studying, and on weekends went to church, so she did not even consider dating, let alone a relationship. It took Michael several months for Vicky to finally agree to go out with him. He was sweet, charming, and touched her with his courtship, giving her flowers, gifts, and little surprises. He even invited her to a family dinner at his parents' house, who liked Vicky very much and immediately approved of their son's choice. Vicky believed he was serious and gave herself to him. He became her first man and remained the only one. She was genuinely happy with him and felt it was fate. Michael also seemed to fall in love and appeared ready to settle down, but it did not last long. 50 Shades of Michael. From the outside, their romance appeared perfect. They were both young, attractive, full of energy, ambitious, and made grand plans for the future. But soon Vicky realized that her chosen one had one peculiarity: an irrepressible sexual appetite and passion for experimentation in bed. At first, he did not put too much pressure on her in this regard, fearing that Vicky would leave him. But as soon as he realized she would not go anywhere, he, as they say, revealed his true self. The modest and religious girl was literally shocked by what was happening, but she was deeply in love with Michael and therefore trusted him, keeping the events in their bedroom behind closed doors a secret for a long time. Additionally, her lover made an official marriage proposal, which she gladly accepted, sincerely believing that after the wedding everything would change and her chosen one would stop his experiments. Soon, one of Vicky's closest friends began to notice that she carefully disguised and hid bruises and small marks under her clothes. She brought Vicky into a frank conversation and asked if her fiancé was hitting her and if she needed help. Vicky initially tried to deny everything, but eventually admitted that all these marks were the consequences of Michael's intimate experiments, as he had a special passion for binding and the use of various toys and devices. She also secretly told her friend that their intimate encounters occurred up to 5 times a day while he remained hungry and unsatisfied. Michael considered himself a skilled lover, and intimacy was for him a kind of art and a form of self-expression. Sometimes he made concessions when Vicky refused to participate in some completely crazy and even dangerous experiments. But in most cases, he still managed to persuade the girl, who was in love with him. Unplanned pregnancy. After defending her diploma, Vicky decided to change jobs and was soon employed as an account manager at a logistics company. Michael also left IKEA and obtained a position as a sales consultant in one of the stores of a large retail chain selling phones, laptops, and other electronics. He almost immediately became one of the top employees because, thanks to his charisma, communication, and persuasive skills, he consistently exceeded sales targets. Soon, the new young employee was promoted to senior salesman, and management seriously considered transferring him to the main office. However, before that, he had to undergo training and improve his qualifications. Michael enjoyed attending training sessions, going on business trips to London, and was very proud of himself. He seemed to have completely forgotten about his young fiancée, only remembering her when he needed intimacy. They rarely communicated. They hardly ever went anywhere together, and outside the bedroom, Vicky seemed to cease to exist for him. Meanwhile, he began having affairs with colleagues, clients, and casual acquaintances. Michael was literally obsessed and addicted to intimacy, and sexual encounters with different women and constant new conquests were a key part of maintaining his self-esteem. At this time, Vicky discovered that she was pregnant and happily shared the news with her fiancé. Their wedding had already been delayed, and she thought that now Michael would hurry things up. But the news that he was going to be a father only angered him. He immediately insisted that the child should be aborted, arguing that they were still so young, had their whole lives ahead of them, and that having children could wait. Vicky was shocked by these words, but firmly refused to terminate the pregnancy. Then the fiancé attempted to pressure her in another way. Michael began convincing her that the news would anger her religious parents because their youngest favorite daughter was living with a man and pregnant without being married. However, according to him, the abortion would remain hidden from everyone, and after the wedding, they would certainly have children. For Vicky, it was a difficult decision, but her chosen one had a real gift of persuasion. A few days later, she gave in and went to the hospital. Unfortunately, there were complications. Vicky stayed in the hospital for several days and then took almost 3 weeks to recover her health. During this entire period, the doctor strictly forbade her to have an intimate life, and Michael, learning about it, flew into a rage. Vicky finally realized that he had mental issues and a genuine addiction to sexual contact. Her beloved literally went insane without intimacy and began leaving the house every day, citing urgent work matters. Vicky suspected he was seeking intimacy elsewhere, but sincerely hoped that everything would change once they were married, and that she could help him overcome this addiction, a loveless marriage, and an adult mistress. The engagement lasted nearly 2 years, and the man apparently had no intention of marrying her, as the current arrangement suited him perfectly. He had a fiancée who faithfully waited for him at home and fully attended to the household, and numerous mistresses on the side whom he regularly changed. Vicky always trusted his word, and even when she discovered his infidelity, she forgave him, provided he promised it would be the last time and that he would not repeat it. But time passed. Vicky began insisting on marriage, as she wanted a full-fledged family and children. Her parents also increasingly raised the issue, but most importantly, the wedding was being pushed by Michael's parents, whom he did not want to upset. Modest and sweet, Vicky was very much liked by them, and they considered her a perfect match for their son, constantly inquiring when they would marry and bring them happiness with grandchildren. With no small help from their parents, they organized a lavish wedding with a white dress, limousine, and a beautiful outdoor ceremony. The newlyweds appeared in love and happy. It seemed they had a long life ahead of them. Yet hardly any of the relatives suspected the dark side of the man, which his young fiancée already knew so well. The newlyweds settled in a large and cozy house in a prestigious area of Warrington, not far from Roberts's parents. Michael did not love his wife. However, marriage made him appear normal in the eyes of relatives and others. Vicky never complained to anyone about his strange preferences and constant cheating, allowing him to continue changing mistresses like gloves. At work, he was quite successful, received another promotion, and earned a good income. After being transferred to a new office, Michael's direct supervisor was Carrie Hall, head of administration at Phones for You. She was 10 years older than him, had been divorced for a long time, and was raising a son alone. At the same time, Carrie was quite attractive, well-groomed, and as her position required, determined and strong-willed. For a long time, she paid no attention to the signs of interest shown by her young subordinate. However, for Michael, this became a signal to act. He sought to win over this woman, applying all his natural charm and eloquence, and after about a month, Carrie reciprocated. The lovers began meeting regularly in hotel rooms, and the woman later described their relationship as turbulent, passionate, and full of experimentation. Carrie was a mature, self-confident woman, undoubtedly flattered by the attention of such a young man. She was also open to trying something new. With her, Michael could realize fantasies he did not dare with his modest wife. He constantly lied to his wife about being late at work, attending corporate trainings, and similar matters, while telling his mistress how unhappy he was in his marriage, claiming it was a mistake of youth and that he was ready to divorce, but his wife would not allow it. This relationship with Carrie lasted more than a year, but since she had no illusions about Michael, she did not demand a divorce, content with their hotel meetings and the marks on her body from dangerous games. After beginning the relationship with Michael, Carrie began favoring clothing that covered her arms and had high necklines, unusual for her. She had always been active in sports and liked showing off her stunning figure, but her style suddenly changed completely. Once, Carrie admitted to a close friend that her lover loved to experiment sexually, and sometimes these experiments went beyond reason. As evidence, she showed a bite mark on her chest, left by Michael in a fit of passion. On her neck, there were blue marks from his hands, and on her wrists, marks from the ropes he liked to use to tie her, leaving her completely under his control. The friend was horrified and suggested Carrie go to the police, but she refused, noting that all this was consensual and that, in most cases, he warned her about what he was going to do. Yet the process itself could get out of control. For example, Michael loved to strangle his partner, convincing her it would heighten the sensations, but a few times he became so carried away that she lost consciousness. Vicky was very afraid of such strangulation games, but each time she gave in to her husband's persuasions, believing that one day he would tire of them, abandon his cruel and painful experiments, or that she herself would get used to them and perceive them as something ordinary. Unfortunately, neither his wife nor any of his mistresses ever attempted to stop Michael. Open correspondence and a love letter. Vicky had suspected her chosen one's affairs on the side even before they were married. She likely realized he was addicted to it, but sincerely believed that things would soon change, and that her love and care could transform the daring and capricious Michael into an exemplary family man. Yet after the wedding, the situation only worsened, and her young husband denied his cheating, doing so very convincingly. Vicky decided to conduct her own investigation and checked her husband's phone while he was sleeping. There she found numerous messages between Michael and Carrie, as well as several other women, which he had not even bothered to delete. The content was quite intimate. With some girls, he exchanged explicit photos. This discovery shocked Vicky. She packed her belongings and decided to stay with a friend temporarily. She did not inform her parents or sister about the situation, fearing it would upset them. Her family believed that Vicky was happily married. Furthermore, religious relatives would have insisted on a divorce had they known of her husband's infidelity. Yet Vicky was still in love and did not want to break up with her husband. Before leaving, she wrote Michael a heartfelt letter, confessing her love for him and calling him the most important man in her life. At the same time, she admitted she knew about his cheating, that she could not tolerate it, and that she was leaving, but would give him time to reflect and would not yet file for divorce. She wrote everything by hand on paper and left it on the refrigerator, held by a magnet. Michael was neither moved nor saddened by the message or his wife's departure, but he did not want to lose a quiet and submissive woman who always waited for him at home, fully cared for the household, and tolerated all his antics and peculiar predilections. That same evening, he followed Vicky to her friend's house, picking up a large bouquet of flowers on the way. Michael knelt, apologized, and begged her to return, promising that from now on she would be his only woman. Vicky once again believed, or rather, wanted to believe, and returned home with him. A new mistress. Naturally, Michael did not end his relationship with Carrie and continued seeing other women, but for a time, he was extremely cautious and even tried to return home for the dinners his wife carefully prepared. He deleted messages from his phone and even changed the password to his social media account. At that time, he began an affair with a new young female employee of the company, Karen Wilson, without ending his relationship with Carrie. Karen at that time had a fiancé and was preparing for the wedding. But Michael persistently pursued her, presenting himself as a devoted lover. He was so captivated by this new target that after 2 months, he decided to end the relationship with 33-year-old Carrie Hall, whom he had grown tired of. He told Karen a carefully crafted story about being unhappy in his marriage and claimed he was ready to leave his wife for her. Soon she yielded, and they became intimate right in the office. A week later, she broke off her engagement and waited for her lover's response. However, Michael had no intention of divorcing, nor did he wish to end his affair with the new mistress. So he simply lied to her, claiming he had already filed for divorce and moved into his parents' house. Fatal blackmail. Vicky soon suspected that her husband continued to cheat on her, and this time decided to act decisively. She took Michael's phone while he was in the shower but found nothing, as he had learned from his previous mistakes and deleted all text messages, changing the password to his social media account. Then Vicky waited until he fell asleep and took his work laptop, which he always carried with him and on which, as it turned out, he had not logged out of his social media account. There, Vicky found correspondence with a new girlfriend, in which her husband confessed his love, claimed he was divorcing his wife, and said he was living with his parents. It was a real shock for her. She took screenshots of the intimate and love messages exchanged between them and saved them on her laptop to have proof of her husband's infidelity. Vicky also checked his wallet, where she found several folded checks for hotel rooms. In the morning, she confronted her husband with all this evidence and, for the first time in their entire relationship, gave him a scandal. Michael was discouraged. He tried to apologize again and promised it would not happen again. But Vicky suddenly threatened to tell his parents about everything, hoping they could reason with him since she could not. Michael became literally furious at this threat. He did not want his parents to know anything and struck his wife. Vicky got up and said she would go to them immediately, heading for the door. Her husband caught up with her, hitting her twice on the head with a heavy jewelry box he grabbed from the dressing table. After she lost consciousness, he squeezed her throat with his hands until she stopped breathing. The man felt no pity or remorse. He wrapped her body in a blanket, packed it into several large garbage bags, and carried the gruesome bundle into his garage. Michael then quickly cleaned the house, packed and removed most of his wife's belongings, and immediately called Karen, inviting her over. They had dinner and spent time in the house where, just a few hours earlier, Roberts had killed his own wife, and then made love in the bedroom where it had happened. Ran off with her lover? The very next day, Michael told his parents that his wife had left him and run off with another man. To do this, he personally went to their home and literally sobbed on his mother's shoulder, showing her messages from Vicky, which he had sent himself from her phone. The messages claimed she had fallen out of love with him, met another man, and decided to live with him. His parents, as best they could, comforted their son, genuinely bewildered at how their sweet, kind, and religious daughter-in-law could do such a thing. At the same time, using the deceased's phone, Michael sent messages to her parents stating that she had fallen in love with another, left with him, and asked for time without being disturbed. Naturally, the Smiths immediately tried calling their daughter to learn the truth and hear her explanations. But the calls were constantly rejected, and only messages arrived asking them to give her time. This seemed very strange to Vicky's parents, so they went to Michael's house to speak with him. His story, however, only raised more questions and doubts. After discovering that Vicky had not been showing up for work without informing anyone, they decided to go to the police. An investigation followed, leading to a gruesome discovery and an escape. On December 1st, 2009, Michael bought a shovel, several meters of rope, rags, and cleaning agents from a hardware store. However, he did not manage to dispose of the body because, on the same day, the police visited his home. At first, the police could not find anything suspicious. However, Michael's behavior and story raised numerous questions and doubts. Strangely, they did not notice the huge package in the corner of the garage during the initial inspection. In the house, there were no clothes, documents, or personal belongings of the missing woman that could indicate she had left. Yet Vicky's laptop remained in the bedroom, and the police seized it for examination. There, they discovered screenshots of Michael's correspondence with his mistresses, which Vicky had saved. The authorities then decided to request the geolocation of Vicky's cell phone, from which messages were regularly sent to her husband and relatives. It was then revealed that the phone had been in the marital home all along. Following this, law enforcement officers revisited the Roberts house and conducted a more thorough search, finally unwrapping the strange package in the garage. The discovery shocked everyone present. However, it was then found that Michael, who had been walking with the police the entire time, had disappeared right under their noses. He took a wallet with cash, which allowed him to hide for several days without being detected. Arrest, trial, and conviction. When the money ran out, Michael went to one of his mistresses, Lavinia Tolley, and asked to stay at her house for a while. That evening, she saw on the news that her lover was wanted for the murder of his wife and immediately, without hesitation, reported his location to the police. At the time of his arrest, Michael was crying and insisted that he was innocent. He claimed that his spouse had died during their intimate games, stating that she had requested to be strangled with a rope belt and that he had overdone it. However, forensic experts determined that first, the woman had been strangled with bare hands. Second, she had been attacked from behind. And third, she had 2 extensive hematomas on her head, sustained during her lifetime, which could not be related to intimate activity. The trial of the perpetrator began in January 2010. The defendant continued to insist that his wife's death was accidental and hoped for leniency. Yet the autopsy results presented by experts proved that he had deliberately struck his wife twice on the head, then strangled her and hid her body in the garage. Michael Roberts was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Moving on to the next case. The case of Yvonne Baldelli, a nightmarish love story on a glorious island. At times, the search for paradise on Earth can lead someone directly into a real-life hell from which escape is impossible. However, it is only fair to point out that a major factor in this journey is who goes with you in the search for this paradise. Selecting a companion should always be done with the greatest care and caution. Yet sometimes, even the person who seems closest and most cherished can turn into a true merciless monster. The story of Yvonne Baldelli and Brian Brimmager began like something taken from a fairy tale. Yvonne believed she had found true love, for which she was prepared to run to the ends of the earth. However, from the very start, her relationship raised concerns among Yvonne's family, who disapproved of her partner. Sadly, the family's fears were not without foundation. This complicated case began in 2011, when a happy and deeply in love Yvonne left with her beloved for a tropical island. As it turned out, she was moving straight toward her own death. Only several years later, distorted fragments of her body were found in the swamp, bagged together with the remains of her treasured pets. Yvonne's family put in great effort to obtain justice, efforts that cost another family member their life. Who was Yvonne Baldelli? Yvonne Olivia Baldelli Mayfold was born on June 30, 1969 in a small town in the southern area of sunny California. She was the third and youngest child of Marjorie and James Fold, growing up alongside her older brother Michael and sister Michelle, with whom she shared an especially close bond from childhood. When Yvonne was 13, her mother died after a long illness. A year later, her father remarried to Lillian Faust, and the grown children developed wonderful relationships with their stepmother, a gentle and caring woman who loved her husband's children as her own. Yvonne received a strong education and explored several career paths, but her main passion was always fashion design, and she dreamed of turning her hobby into a profitable business. However, luck never seemed to be in her favor when it came to her personal life. She was married twice, but both marriages ended in separation. In addition, a surgery she underwent in her youth, followed by complications, left Yvonne unable to have children. After divorcing her second husband, Kevin Baldelli, in 2007, Yvonne lived alone in her small apartment with her beloved dog, whom she lovingly called her child. She remained in constant contact with her father and sister, calling them almost every day, and making an effort to see her family at least once a month. Meeting Brian and the love triangle. In 2009, as Yvonne was preparing to celebrate her 40th birthday, she met a Marine named Brian Brimmager. At that time, he was legally married and raising a young son with his wife. Despite this, Brian was open to having an affair and shared with his mistress how unhappy he was in his marriage, claiming he had not filed for divorce only because of his child, whom he did not want to upset. Baldelli fell for this fit and handsome man at first sight and believed every word he said. Having experienced the pain of a loveless marriage herself and knowing how difficult it can be to leave such a relationship, she did not rush her partner, believing that the presence of a child was indeed the main obstacle. However, Brian was not as honest and sincere as he seemed. From an early age, his attractive appearance had made him extremely popular with the opposite sex. He was used to managing several relationships at the same time and skillfully deceived the women who fell for him, promising each of them marriage, a family, and eternal love. It soon became known that the married Brimmager was not only seeing Yvonne, but also had another mistress. This other woman was Christine Verhoeven, a beautiful blonde with wide-ranging connections. She was an analyst at the White House and had built an impressive career during George W. Bush Jr.'s administration. When Yvonne learned about the existence of another rival, she chose to confront the issue directly and was prepared to fight for the man she loved. Summoning her courage, she called her lover's wife to tell her that Brian was cheating on her with not one, but two women. This disclosure triggered a major scandal, forcing Brian to make a difficult decision. In the end, he chose Yvonne, though it is possible that she pressured him into making this choice. A few months later, Brian officially divorced his wife and moved in with his new love interest. At that time, he was still serving in the Marines, but had been considering ending his military career for some time. The couple appeared genuinely happy, but Yvonne's relatives remained cautious about her new partner, doubting the sincerity of his feelings. Moving to a tropical paradise. In the summer of 2011, Brian began to talk about completely changing his life, leaving the service, moving away from the busy city, and settling down on a tropical island. Yvonne shared his feelings, supported him in everything, and was ready to follow him wherever and whenever he decided. She believed she had met the most important man in her life and adored him. By September of that same year, the decision was final. The couple chose to move to Panama and settle on the small island of Coronero, a place that could truly be called paradise. Yvonne informed her family just before leaving, so they had no opportunity to persuade her to reconsider. Yvonne sold her apartment, left her job, and began packing for the trip. She took only a few bikinis, shorts, tank tops, and her sewing machine, hoping to fulfill her dream of opening a small boutique to create and sell custom outfits to tourists on the new island. In early September, Brian, Yvonne, and her beloved little dog flew to Panama. They spent a few days in the country's capital before taking a ferry to Carnero Island, where they rented a house right on the oceanfront. The climate was hot and humid with very little temperature variation, attracting a constant flow of tourists throughout the year, mainly diving and surfing enthusiasts. The island was only 1 square kilometer, so one could calmly walk around it in about an hour. All the infrastructure was located along the coast, while the interior was dense jungle and swampy areas filled with venomous snakes, spiders, and other wildlife, making it unsafe to enter. Brian, who had been an excellent guitar player since his youth, brought his instrument with the intention of starting a musical career on the island, performing in entertainment venues. Within a week after moving, he had made contacts with several local bar owners, and one of them gladly offered him a job. He played in the evenings, entertaining the crowd, but his appreciative audience often bought him drinks as a compliment, leading him to drink heavily almost every day. Yvonne's business also developed very slowly with poor sales and almost no profit. However, she did not lose heart. She started working at one of the bars and even adopted a second dog she found on the island and decided to keep. She communicated with her sister, Michelle Valenzuela, almost every day, sharing everything. But her messages became increasingly shorter and more somber, which worried her family. The first few months on the island seemed like paradise to the couple. Yvonne hoped that Brian would propose, and they would have a romantic wedding ceremony on the ocean shore. But time went on. Brian did not hurry into marriage, and their relationship quickly deteriorated. The mysterious disappearance. In early December, Michelle stopped receiving messages from Yvonne, which greatly increased her concerns. Then, on December 14, 2011, Brian unexpectedly called Michelle, asking when he could come by to collect his SUV, which he had left in her garage before going to Panama. This call and question caught Michelle by surprise. It meant Brian had returned to the U.S. and wanted to retrieve his vehicle. But where was Yvonne? Why had she not returned or even called? In reply, Brian claimed he had explained everything in an email sent a few days earlier. He also mentioned that his now ex-girlfriend had supposedly sent her a message explaining the situation. Michelle checked her messages but found nothing, so she turned to her email. Indeed, there were 2 unread messages, one from her sister and one from her boyfriend. In his message, Brian said that Yvonne had left him, running away with a new lover to Costa Rica. The other message, supposedly from Yvonne, claimed she had left Brian after discovering his infidelity and learning that another woman had given birth to his child. It ended with her stating she had met another man and gone to Costa Rica with him. The other woman turned out to be Brian's old friend, Christine Verhoeven, with whom he had been involved all along and who was pregnant with his child when he and Yvonne flew to Panama. At first glance, everything seemed believable and logical, especially since Yvonne could not have children. The news that her partner had fathered a child with someone else could have been devastating for her. However, Yvonne was not known for impulsive behavior, and she would certainly have called her sister to discuss such major changes in her life. Moreover, the tone of the supposed message from Yvonne was somewhat strange and unlike her earlier communications, which raised further suspicions. When Michelle tried to find out her sister's current location, she could not obtain any definite information. Calls were unanswered, and the messages that did come through were short and distant, saying things like, "I'm okay, I need some time, I'm not ready to talk about this." Michelle suggested that Brian should join her in filing a missing persons report. Brian seemed nervous but insisted it was not necessary, claiming Yvonne was fine, capable of looking after herself, and would decide when to come home on her own. Despite Brian's unwillingness even to talk about the matter and his rushed departure after picking up his vehicle, a message from Yvonne's phone soon arrived, stating she planned to return home in January for their father's birthday. This message gave Michelle some relief, and she decided to wait a few more weeks, hoping Yvonne would return as stated in the message. Search efforts and surprising discoveries. By mid-January, not only had Yvonne not returned home, but she also had not called even once during that time, and her messages had stopped completely. Moreover, Michelle was shocked to learn that Brian had married the mother of his child, Christine Verhoeven, right before the new year, which seemed very strange since he had separated from his former girlfriend only a few weeks before the celebration. Concerned, Michelle finally went to the police and reported her sister missing, suspecting that Yvonne had not gone to Costa Rica. An official inquiry sent to Panama confirmed her fears. It was firmly established that Yvonne Baldelli had not left the country. Valenzuela then turned to her cousin, a programmer, to help trace the IP address from which Yvonne's messages were sent, identifying their true origin. It turned out the emails, supposedly sent by Yvonne from Costa Rica in December, were actually sent from Dana Point, California, where Brian was located. The same IP address was used for an email sent by Brian himself. As the situation grew increasingly alarming, Michelle quickly informed the police about her discovery. Valenzuela contacted the FBI and the State Department, sharing her suspicions that Brian had harmed her sister in Panama and then continued to send messages from her phone and email, pretending to be her for about a month. However, there was not enough solid evidence at the time to arrest him, so law enforcement could only interview him and continue gathering proof of his guilt. It was revealed that Brian had proposed to Christine while still in Panama with Yvonne. He promised Verhoeven that he would soon return, that they would get married and raise their daughter together. Moreover, Christine was unaware that her child's father had gone to the island with another woman, as he had told her he was there on business. The family's own investigation. 2 months after the woman's disappearance, her sister and niece personally flew to Panama. There, they sought the expertise of Don Winner, a former U.S. intelligence officer turned investigator, specializing in locating missing U.S. citizens. They shared the story of Yvonne's disappearance and the version of events provided by Brian. Winner, after listening to them, immediately expressed concern that the chances of Yvonne being alive were slim. With vast experience in such investigations and using his connections, Winner decided to put pressure on the Panamanian government and publicize the case, turning the disappearance of an American woman into international news. A press conference was also organized with the participation of Yvonne's family members. Later, Yvonne's father, stepmother, brother, and several other relatives and close friends arrived in Panama to join the search and assist the investigation. Together, they went to the tropical island of Caramaro, combing it thoroughly, yet they found no trace of Baldelli. Their search efforts were hindered by dense undergrowth and swampy marshes filled with wildlife. In addition, the family questioned the island's residents about how well they knew Brian and Yvonne and what they could say about them. It turned out that the couple had recently been heavily indulging in alcoholic drinks and were often involved in loud disputes, unconcerned about those around them. Almost every day, they were seen in bars drinking alcohol and having heated arguments. Furthermore, people began to notice bruises and scratches on Yvonne's face and body. She almost never removed her sunglasses, seemingly to conceal the bruises under her eyes. The landlord of the house the couple had rented confirmed that neighbors regularly complained about the noise, screams, and cursing coming from their residence. At the same time, FBI agents brought a special team of divers to the island to search the waters around it for any possible evidence or remains of the missing woman. Unfortunately, these searches did not produce any success. The prime suspect and the first solid evidence. From the beginning, Brian was the prime suspect in the case, but there was nothing concrete to charge him with. He denied any involvement, consistently repeating the same story about his ex-partner running off with another man. It was not until September 21, 2012, that Brimmager was finally interrogated and a search was conducted at his home. At the time, his wife Christine was at work, while Brian was unemployed, staying at home with their child and indulging in his favorite pastime, playing golf. Initially, he appeared confident, repeating that Yvonne had left him after discovering his child with another woman. However, he grew visibly nervous when the police mentioned that the last messages sent in Yvonne's name had originated from his area and expressed interest in examining the laptop found on his table. The seized laptop turned out to belong to Yvonne, with messages sent from it after she supposedly fled. A photo of the missing woman with a bruise under her eye was found on the computer, along with a screenshot of a conversation from November, where Brian and Christine discussed their ongoing affair and shared daughter, presumably revealing how Yvonne learned about them. Moreover, the laptop's search history from November 26, 2011, included queries such as how to clean blood and how to remove blood from a mattress. These pieces of evidence were significant but circumstantial, since neither a body nor a mattress with bloodstains was found. The fact that Brian had been sending messages pretending to be Yvonne did not definitively prove his guilt. Soon, Don Winter discovered that before leaving Panama, Brimmager had sold a machete he owned. In an online conversation with a potential buyer, he joked that he had used the weapon just once to finish off a stripper. The joke was macabre, prompting authorities to track down the new owner of the machete and seize the blade for examination, which initially revealed nothing conclusive: the long-awaited arrest. The police overlooked another crucial detail: Yvonne's bank card, which Brian used after her disappearance. To lend credibility to his story, before returning to the United States, he made a trip to Costa Rica and used the missing woman's card several times, creating the illusion that she had indeed fled to that country. He paid for his tickets in cash and withdrew money from multiple ATMs in San Jose, draining the card before discarding it. However, Brimmager failed to consider that he was captured on surveillance cameras at the ATMs. It was not until July 2013, a year and a half after Yvonne's disappearance, that her relatives, armed with all the evidence gathered by the police, FBI agents, and Don Winter, finally managed to secure Brian's arrest. Initially, he was detained on charges of making false statements and obstructing the investigation, as there was nothing more substantial to charge him with at that time. By then, he had become a father for the second time, as Christine had given birth to a son just a week before his arrest. Authorities attempted to engage the suspect in a candid conversation, offering him a chance to confess to the crime and disclose the location of the body, but Brian consistently denied any wrongdoing. His lawyer also insisted on the absence of a body or direct evidence proving Yvonne's death and Brian's involvement in it. The gruesome discovery in the swamp. Just 2 months after Brimmager's arrest, a significant breakthrough occurred in the case. On the island of Carneiro, a worker taking a shortcut wandered into the swampy underbrush and spotted an army backpack barely visible above the water. Driven by curiosity and hoping to find something valuable or useful inside, he looked in the bag, only to recoil in horror at the sight of a human skull staring back at him. He immediately reported his discovery to the police, and responding officers took the backpack for examination. Inside were fragments of a human body along with the remains of 2 small dogs. The remains had been chopped up, placed in the bag, and discarded in a location where it was assumed they would never be found. DNA testing confirmed that the human remains belonged to Yvonne, although limbs were missing. Pathologists also determined that she had been brutally beaten before her death, with a broken nose, cheekbone, and several missing teeth. The deaths of the dogs were likely orchestrated to lend credibility to the narrative, as it seemed implausible that she would willingly leave behind her cherished pets on the island, suggesting a scenario where they were killed and laid to rest alongside their owner. When the chop marks found on the victim's bones were matched with the blade of the machete, there was no doubt. The body had been dismembered using this weapon, as each blade has its own signature, akin to a person's fingerprints. With this evidence, Brian was formally charged with murder, dismemberment, and concealing a crime. The trial and verdict. In early 2014, Michelle Valenzuela was diagnosed with an advanced stage of aggressive cancer. She had been so consumed by the investigation into her sister's case that she neglected her deteriorating health, postponing visits to the doctor. After undergoing intensive treatment for about 6 months and realizing it was futile, she decided to dedicate the last months of her life to seeking justice for her sister. In September 2014, when doctors told Michelle she had only a few weeks left, she declared that although she was losing her battle with the disease, she would continue to fight for her sister until her last breath. Choosing to give her testimony in front of Brian, she detailed everything she knew and submitted all their correspondence with Yvonne to the court. She meticulously described Brian's actions after her sister's disappearance and then fainted from weakness, passing away 3 days later. The prosecution argued that on the evening of November 26th, following another argument with Yvonne when she discovered Brian's communications with Christine, Brian, in a fit of rage and under the influence of alcohol, assaulted Yvonne and fatally stabbed her. He then dismembered her body in the bathtub using the machete, also using it to kill Yvonne's beloved dogs, and placed the remains in his military backpack. The limbs that did not fit in the bag were dumped in the ocean, dropped off a rocky cliff early in the morning along with the blood-stained mattress. Brian carried the backpack deep into the island and submerged it in a swamp. For the following weeks, he continued living in the same coastal house, meticulously erasing any evidence of the crime. He told everyone on the island a story about his flighty girlfriend leaving him for a new lover, a story that sounded convincing enough that locals sympathized with Brian. He even managed to find a new girlfriend, Nicole Powell, who comforted him for a few weeks until his departure to the U.S. However, at the trial, Nicole testified against Brian, accusing him of lying and cruelty. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Brian was forced to admit his guilt, but insisted that it was self-defense, claiming Yvonne had first attacked him with a knife, which he then used against her. He asserted that all subsequent actions were carried out in a state of shock, claiming he did not remember dismembering and packing the body, taking the lives of the dogs, and so forth. However, his internet searches and attempts to eliminate evidence demonstrated his full awareness and efforts to fabricate a story to justify Yvonne's disappearance. In the spring of 2016, Brian was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 26 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 2035. His service in the Marines was considered during sentencing, allowing him to avoid a life sentence. Lastly, Brian's wife, Christine Verhoeven, stated that she still believed in her husband's innocence and would continue to support him. Moving on to the next case. The case of Zoe Nelson. Zoe Nelson was born on August 13, 1992, in Wishaw, Scotland. At the age of 18, she lived with her mother, stepfather, and two younger sisters, including 16-year-old Laura, and, in New Mains, a village on the eastern edge of Wishaw, approximately 18 miles southeast of Glasgow. Zoe attended Motherwell College, where she was a popular student with many friends. A complicated romantic situation developed when both Zoe and her sister Laura and became involved with the same 20-year-old man, Robert Bain, who lived with his grandparents about a mile from the Nelson family home. Tensions between the sisters escalated, leading to conflicts. On May 22, 2010, Zoe met Robert outside her home, which upset Laura Ann. Upon seeing this, Laura Ann rushed out of the house to confront Zoe. Their 40-year-old mother, Mary Ann Nelson, witnessed the altercation between her daughters. According to Mary Ann, Laura Ann tried to provoke Zoe by flicking her hair and attempted to slap her face, resulting in a physical confrontation at the end of the driveway. Mary Ann intervened, breaking up the fight and instructing the sisters to leave and not return. Zoe complied with her mother's order and never went back home. Around 11 p.m. that same evening, some locals observed someone setting a fire in the wooded area known as Monkey Hill. The smell of smoke reached nearby homes, but at the time, it drew little attention. Zoe's aunt, 35-year-old Shirley Nelson, later recalled that night, describing how she had been sitting in her garden in New Mains after completing her second work shift. She and her sister remained at the back of the house until about 11 p.m., when it became cooler, and they noticed the smell of smoke. However, they did not think much of it due to the warm weather. The following day, Zoe's family attempted to contact her, but received no response. On the afternoon of May 23rd, Stuart Bell, a 45-year-old government employee from Wishaw, rode his motorcycle into a nearby wooded area and observed something unusual. At first, he believed it to be a charred tailor's dummy, but upon closer inspection, he realized it was a human body that had been severely damaged by fire. He immediately returned home to call the police, who arrived 15 to 20 minutes later. Upon arrival, the police sealed off the area, as nothing so horrific had ever occurred there before. News of the discovery quickly spread, and when Zoe's family learned of it, her mother, Mary Ann Nelson, went to the police to report her daughter missing, noting that Zoe had disappeared after their argument and that Mary Ann had told her not to come home. The police soon delivered the devastating news to the Nelson family. Zoe had been the victim of a crime. Mary Ann issued a statement through the police, describing Zoe as a typical, popular 17-year-old with a strong presence in the local community and many friends. She would have turned 18 in just a few months. Her family was deeply distraught over her loss. Zoe's stepfather, Daniel, and her sisters, Laura and Ashley, were heartbroken over the tragedy, and the family urged anyone with information to come forward and assist the police in their investigation. Hugh Logan, principal of Motherwell College, where Zoe studied vehicle body repair, expressed shock on behalf of the college community upon learning of her death. He described Zoe as a very popular student and conveyed that the college's thoughts were with her family and friends. A thorough investigation of the scene spanned several days, with a team of at least 50 police officers working on the case. Detective Derek Robertson, a member of the main investigation team, expressed sorrow over the loss of Zoe's young life and vowed that his officers would not rest until the person responsible was apprehended. He urged anyone who saw Zoe between 5 p.m. and 11:20 p.m. on Saturday night to come forward and assist the investigation. Robertson noted that, given the area's popularity on the hottest day of the year, many people would have been taking shortcuts and sunbathing, and that the police were particularly interested in speaking with those who may have used the dirt trails, including one that crossed near the location where Zoe's body was discovered. Zoe was approximately 5 feet 6 inches tall, with a heavy build and collar-length brown hair. At the time she went missing, she was wearing gray tracksuit bottoms, a white long-sleeve top, and black Nike trainers. Detectives reviewed CCTV footage, phone records, and computer data, as well as conducted door-to-door inquiries and spoke with Zoe's friends and family in an effort to reconstruct her last movements on May 26th. The police released video footage from a local shop showing Zoe just hours before her death. These small details were crucial to the investigation, helping police trace Zoe's movements and ultimately leading to the apprehension of the person responsible for her death. After examining the crime scene, investigators found a red plastic sombrero-shaped cap from a Sierra Silver tequila bottle near the body and an empty bottle of the same brand on the opposite side of a small walkway nearby. Because the body had been exposed to fire for approximately 7 hours, forensic experts faced limitations in determining the exact cause of death. The body was found with a partially melted plastic bag covering most of the face, leading pathologists to conclude that asphyxiation was the most likely cause of death. Despite the damage, the palm of the right hand remained relatively intact, allowing 2 DNA samples to be collected, one matching Zoe Nelson herself and the other belonging to an unidentified male. Ultimately, the official cause of death was recorded as undetermined. By May 28th, police had gathered several witness statements that provided a disturbing account of Zoe's final days. One witness reported seeing Zoe with a heavily intoxicated and aggressive man around 5:15 p.m. on May 22nd, who was striking her on the head. Another witness claimed to have seen Zoe walking with a man with a tattooed face near his home in New Mains. A third witness described seeing Zoe with a similar-looking man in New Mains who appeared angry, struck a lamp post, and threatened to take someone's life that night. Multiple witnesses came forward, all describing the same young man, 20-year-old Robert Bain. Notably, Robert Bain had a prior criminal record despite his youth. He had served 18 months in prison for robbery and was released just 7 weeks before Zoe's death. Additionally, he had been arrested 4 times for possession of illegal substances, though as a juvenile he faced minimal consequences. Investigators began to regard Robert Bain as the prime suspect in the case. Before further action could be taken, Bain unexpectedly appeared at the police station in Wishaw around 5:50 p.m. on May 28th. He was visibly intoxicated, slurring his words, and wished to make a statement. Bain claimed that a few days earlier, he had been in Motherwell, where he boarded a bus to return home. During the journey, he said, a man named Stuart Campbell got on the same bus. Bain alleged that he approached Campbell and asked whether he had been with Zoe on the previous Saturday night. According to Bain, Campbell's response was incriminating. Yes, I took her life. This was the first mention of Stuart Campbell's name throughout the entire investigation, whereas Robert Bain's name had surfaced repeatedly. Consequently, the police arrested Bain on the same day. A strong justification for Robert Bain's arrest would later emerge during his trial. At the time of his arrest, Bain claimed he had last seen Zoe on a morning in May. However, forensic tests provided incriminating evidence against him. A DNA sample collected from Zoe Nelson's hand revealed not only her own DNA, but also traces of another individual's DNA, which matched part of Bain's DNA profile. Furthermore, DNA evidence found on a tequila bottle and its cap, discovered near Zoe's body, matched both Zoe Nelson and Robert Bain, according to forensic experts. This suggested that both individuals had consumed from the bottle and then replaced the cap. Expert Marie Campbell stated that the scientific findings indicated Robert Bain's DNA had been deposited between Zoe Nelson's fingers and on her right palm. The likelihood of the DNA on the red plastic sombrero lid belonging to anyone other than Robert Bain was an astonishing 1 in 10 million. Robert Bain was accused of involvement in Zoe Nelson's death based on multiple eyewitness accounts and the DNA evidence. Despite this, he pleaded not guilty and behaved defiantly, even confronting one of the investigators. He also denied an earlier alleged assault on Zoe, during which a witness claimed he had struck her on the head with his fist. Hundreds attended Zoe Nelson's funeral at Courtness Memorial Church on June 16, 2010. She was laid to rest at Campus Nathan Cemetery. Over 200 mourners, including her mother, sisters, and grandmother, gathered to pay their respects. Reverend Graham Rayburn led the service, noting the large turnout as a testament to Zoe's significant impact. He described her as a happy, cheerful teenager with a big heart who loved fast cars and ranges. Tragically, she never met her newborn nephew or had the opportunity to contact her biological father. On March 1, 2011, Robert Bain's trial began, during which he maintained his innocence. While testifying in court, Zoe Nelson's teenage friends recounted a conversation they had with her a week before her death, in which she attributed her scratches and bruises to a fight with Robert Bain. According to her friends, Zoe described Bain as bossy, unstable, and prone to anger over minor matters. He also controlled her social circle, dictating which friends she could associate with. Although Zoe and Bain's relationship was relatively short-lived, as he had only been out of prison for 2 months, he exerted significant influence over her and also pursued a relationship with her 16-year-old sister, Laura Ann. Notably, Laura Ann was aware of her sister's death 5 days before the body was discovered by a passerby, but she kept this information secret until the trial, where it was revealed that Bain had taken Laura and to the location of Zoe's body. Laura Ann, who testified from behind a screen to avoid seeing Bain, recounted that on May 23, the day after her argument with Zoe, she visited Bain's address to return some clothes. Upon arrival, she observed that Robert appeared nervous and had been consuming vodka. They soon left the house, with Bain claiming he wanted to show her something. According to Laura Ann, he led her to the location where Zoe's body lay. Recognizing the ranger's tattoo on her arm, Laura Ann identified the body as her sister. During court questioning, Laura Ann stated that Bain had confessed to hitting Zoe, and when Zoe attempted to retaliate, he lost control and took her life. Bain then allegedly used gasoline in an attempt to destroy evidence of the crime. Laura Ann admitted to walking with Bain on the day following the discovery of the body. Afterwards, she visited his home, spending time in his bedroom, where they listened to music together. She also had a phone conversation with him that lasted approximately an hour. A friend of Laura Ann, who testified in court, recalled that Laura Ann appeared happy and normal, despite knowing her sister was dead. When asked why she did not reveal everything to the police during her initial interrogation, Laura Ann explained that she feared her mother would not believe her and might think she was responsible for Zoe's death. The jury heard testimony from Laura Ann Nelson, who stated that Robert Bain had threatened her, saying she would face the same consequences as Zoe if she disclosed his actions to anyone. On March 25, 2011, a jury of 7 men and 7 women delivered a unanimous guilty verdict. As the verdict was read, Bain became violent and had to be physically restrained. Handcuffed, he jumped in the dock, struggling with security officers and police, and headbutted one of them. He also shouted insults and threats at Zoe Nelson's family, forcing the courtroom to be cleared while order was restored. After a 20-minute adjournment, Judge Lady Dorian agreed to continue the trial in Bain's absence. In a separate matter, Robert Bain was acquitted of stealing alcohol from an Asda store in New Mains on May 22, as well as disorderly conduct related to yelling, cursing, and brandishing a knife in various streets of Wishaw on the same day. Bain was also acquitted of stealing Zoe's cell phone, which was found in the woods, and of threatening a police officer during an interview at Motherwell Police Station on May 28. On April 27, 2011, Robert Bain was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 20 years for taking the life of Zoe Nelson. He received an additional 6 years for the obstruction of justice charge, with both sentences to be served concurrently. The judge, Lady Dorian, described the crime as appalling and shocking. On Christmas Eve, 2022, 29-year-old Laura Ann Nelson was found dead in her apartment after not being heard from for several days. She was survived by 2 children, aged 3 and 4. Her death was not considered criminal, as she had health problems, specifically type 1 diabetes. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into cold case investigations. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video. And remember, the search for truth never stops.